It's not what you tell the audience that they remember. It's how you made them. How do you make your audience feel? If you can show your audience that you care about them and you care about what they walk away with long after the presentation, then you've done your job as a speaker.
Becoming a successful professional speaker is a journey. How do you find that first stage, the next stage, and then the bigger and better stages? I'm Lee Hayes, your host. My co-hosts and I are here to guide you to a more successful speaking career. You're listening to Path to the Main Stage podcast. Thanks for joining today. I have an amazing co-host that just, every time I talk to him, I love talking with him. So let me tell you a little bit about Freddie Ravel before I let him join here officially. And Freddie, I apologize. I'm going to miss so many things that you've done, but these are just things that stick in my mind. So Freddie is a musician who is Grammy-nominated, who's worked with Madonna. I think you played at the Grammys with Prince. You have performed, I believe, with Sheryl Crow recently, working on her movie, Madonna, Earth, Wind, and Fire. You toured for, 2 years with Carlos Santana. And then I know you've worked with musical teams for J-Lo, Kimmy Kimmel. Excuse me, Jimmy Kimmel, and Lady Gaga. And I know you have been named the Keynote Maestro of the City of Los Angeles. You have a system called Life in Tune, which is the business tie-in, how the rhythm and melody of music ties right into business. You've spoken for Apple, NASA, Google, Prudential, plenty of others. I'm sure I'm missing really big things here, but you are amazing, and you blend all these aspects of performance and speaking. And so before we get rolling too much, what am I missing? I mean, we've worked together for nearly a decade now. What are the big points I'm missing? Who are these amazing people that I should have mentioned who I haven't?
First of all, thank you, Lee. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to co-host with you. And I've loved everything we've done together. You're one of the great representations out there of what we do in the speaking world, because of your candidness and you're just so on point in everything you do. The things that you missed, I think most importantly is I'm a father to 2 beautiful children.
Yes.
And I think I have a 19-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter. You know, we like to say we're raising our kids, but actually our kids are raising us. And I learned a lot. I learned so much from my kids. They keep me on track with where the generations are thinking. Like when I spoke in Dubai last year, I had about 5,000 people there. There were a lot of people in the audience that were under 30 years old. And they help my kids help keep me on track with what's going on in the music of today. In addition to the artists that you mentioned, those years that I worked with Carlos Santana and Earth, Wind, and Fire and Prince and Madonna, all that, it's all been amazing. But the thing that makes it so exciting for me is music is an infinite well of inspiration. And sometimes, like the engagement that you booked me for recently, I went from Beethoven to Elvis Presley in 10 seconds. To illustrate certain points.
And that was an amazing event, I think, in Louisiana, nearly 1,000 people in the room. They have not stopped raving about you. What a great experience. And I know one of the things they love so much, which is why I grabbed you today for this podcast, is the way you engaged the audience. I heard you had nuns dancing in the front row.
We did. They're very cool nuns, though. Super cool nuns. But yeah, they were rocking and rolling, and it was Louisiana is famous for being the most diverse state. If you put all the regions of Louisiana, every single region is equally represented with black, white, red, Asian, everything. Everyone's there. They call it the gumbo state. Literally, it's literally called the gumbo state because of the tremendous diversity that is there. And so, yeah, I was able to go rock and roll, R&B, jazz, hip hop, Zydeco, funk, classical music.
And bring it all together.
Yeah, and Louisiana blues, and Mississippi too, because there was a big part of the company was from Mississippi as well.
So now you have such a musical, obviously, background, diverse areas. How did you get into keynote speaking for corporations? What was your inspiration? What was that tie-in that brought you to speaking?
In one word, I would say it was the time that I worked with Deepak Chopra in the early 90s. I was doing my second album called Soul to Soul, and I wanted to write a song that was spiritual. And he approached me about writing a song called Slip in the Gap. And the gap is the space between one thought and the other thought. That is the gap. And if you can understand what is happening from one thought to the next, you can kind of be very present in everything in life. You're not being taken over by your ego and your brain. You're being kind of like a ninja. You're in a state of, I could go to the left, I could go to the right, I could stay in the center. It kind of neutralizes you in a way where you can make fast decisions without being too biased about anything because you're in the gap. So I was and the song was also about meditation too. Meditation and that. It came out so good, and it was pitched to the human potential movement. So here I am writing I've been writing songs for the Latin market, for blues, for R&B, for pop, but I've never written a song for the human potential movement, which at that time was like Chicken Soup for the Soul, was sort of the spearheading marketing plan, The Secret. These are the things that were real big back then. And it was so successful, I thought, wait a second, what about the space between the notes of music, right? What about, what is the difference? Frank Sinatra goes, this little town blues. He could have gone, this little town blues. No, dun, da, 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 dun. He phrased it differently. And I thought, well, Tony Bennett wouldn't have done it that way, and Lady Gaga wouldn't have done it that way. So the space from one note to the next is what shapes the way people hear things. And we all know that, even though we're talking about speaking, 80% of communication is nonverbal. That's a big piece. So isn't this kind of an irony, right? We're in the speaking business, but guess what? 80% of it's nonverbal.
And it's so fascinating. So I know that there are speakers who talk about body language, but you're actually talking about something different and deeper than that. So what are aspects of speaking and of connection which are nonverbal, but also, here I'm talking with my hands, right? But you're talking about the way people speak. What are some of those aspects? The space between the notes, what else?
So watch this. I'm going to hold up the mirror right now because Lee, you're a great communicator. You just said, what is it, Freddie, about the way? You see what you just did? You did it without even thinking about it. You took the word way and you made it about 4 times longer than anybody else would say. Because most people would say, so what is it about the way you speak? You went, what is it about the way you speak? What you just did is a classic example of leaning into a certain word with a tone. You kind of leaned in and then the pitch went down a little bit. That's a form of communication that brings audiences in, right? And you'll notice as we're talking, we're having a pause. We're not just rambling through. I'm not just talking really, really quickly and I'm not leaving any space between the notes. And I'm not ignoring the fact that you're using the way I'm talking about. So a technical definition of that is called the pregnant pause. People use that as a term. I call it the space between the words or the pause between the notes. And except I'll take that and I'll talk about Count Basie for a moment because Count Basie was a piano player who didn't play a lot of notes, but he played the right notes and he used a lot of space. And it made him one of the most successful pianists of the 20th century. So it's not about speed. It's not about speed. It's not about speed. It's about, remember the saying, it's not what you tell the audience that they remember. It's how you made them. How do you make your audience feel? If you can show your audience that you care about them and you care about what they walk away with long after the presentation, then you've done your job as a speaker.
And I think you've just given them, or I heard, two major tips, which is the spaces between the words emphasize what you're saying to engage your audience, but also the speaker can become a better speaker by paying attention to not just what they say, but how they say it, the way they say it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important. I mean, I also will give you another, maybe just as another tip that the speakers can think about. Rhyming, alliteration. We know that yeah. So like I have one of the things I talk about in my speech as part of the methodology of Life in Tune. I talk about melody, harmony, and rhythm because these are the three building blocks of music. One way for people to remember it really easy is I say melody and harmony is what you sing, rhythm and timing is everything. Now, I could say, well, melody has to do with leadership and harmony has to do with collaboration, and rhythm is really a tool of time management and productivity. I could say it just like that. And everything I said is true. And everything I said about that is a unique take on melody, harmony, rhythm. But if I go melody and harmony is what you sing, rhythm and timing is everything.
Now it stays.
I have people who not text me, but they come into LinkedIn. They're strangers or people I don't even know. Hey, Freddie, I was at your engagement in New York, and guess what? And then they type in melody and harmony is what you sing, rhythm and timing is everything. Like they remember it. And I learned that from playing music. We have a thing in music called and every song has a hook, virtually.
Okay, so what is the hook? So I am not a musician, so explain the hook to me.
Well, if we go really early, we could say like a Beatles song, I want to hold your hand. I want to hold, right? Just talking about the Beatles. I'm using the Beatles because they're so universal, right? We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. But that's a hook, right? I can't get no satisfaction. Rolling Stones, right? Whoa, 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 caught in a bad romance. Whoa, Lady Gaga, Bad Romance. Da, 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 da. But it's a hook. And of course, if you're at a pop music festival and she starts singing that song, 30,000 people hold up their phones and light up their iPhones and start singing that because it's catchy. That's why it's called a hook. Because what did the hook do? It catches the bait. That's why it's called a hook. So I learned after years of playing music that you want to have a good hook in every song you write. You got to have, well, guess what? In a good speech, you got to have a good hook. And I use techniques like poetry. I use alliteration. Right? I remember in this presentation I did that Deanna, I talked about care isn't code, care is connection. They all start with the letter C. And I wrote that 5 weeks ago. It's not something that's in my repertoire, but this company was about healthcare. They're healthcare workers. So I went, care isn't code, meaning AI is not going to take care of people the way humans will do. So care isn't code, care is connection. So care, code, connection. Alliteration.
Love the alliteration. I'm already thinking, what am I going to call this podcast? It's either going to be the spaces between the words or alliteration. I'm not sure. But I want to jump on something you just said about you wrote this 5 weeks ago for this event. Another skill which you do so well that I want people to learn from is the way you take the essence of a company and work it flawlessly into your keynote. And I apologize already. I'm going to butcher this quote, but even though I'm saying it wrong, it sticks with me. years ago, and I've seen it in your sizzle reels, you're with a company and you're talking about your music, you're going on, and you say, look at the word silent. If you just rearrange the letters, they become listen, which is the first thing we promise customers at Honda, something like that.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God. Like, he took their word, worked it into his keynote like it belonged there. And I can imagine the CEO and the event planner going, yes, that's exactly what we wanted, right? Because he took our words. How do you do that? And do you do that every time you speak? Do you take a phrase, a word, something from the company and work it in, or a feeling? How do you do that?
Thank you for that. I do it almost intuitively. I will say that I am a very, I would be called I'm a very sensory oriented person. So my radar is very highly up all the time, and I'm interested in tuning whatever I'm feeling. So that's number one. Is I kind of come in before I even open up or say hello to somebody. I try to feel the energy and match what I'm feeling from them. That's number one. So have this intuitive feeling about what you're going to say, and try not to say the first word. Try to get a temperature of the room. Lots of times, for example, when we've done these pre-conference calls with a client, and they have not formally hired me yet, but we're doing a get acquainted call. I make sure that I don't say much at the beginning. I make sure I listen a lot, because I'm listening for a lot of things. I'm listening for who they are, how fast they speak, what their energy is, and what their challenges are. So if they get on the phone and the first thing they say is, oh man, things are crazy today. I'm so sorry, but I'm 5 minutes late. Oh my God. I already know that they're living a stressful existence. I already know. And I already know that they feel overworked. So I lean into that. I go, one thing I want to make sure we talk about is ways to alleviate stress when we speak at this conference. Because I can tell she's coming from stress. So, and then I say to her, I verified, I go, by the way, is that what are the outcomes you'd like to see? Oh my God. That's, we want to get people neutralized. You don't want people running around like a chicken with their head cut off. We don't want that. We want stability. Businesses and most organizations want a certain level of predictability, consistency. They want to feel secure. This is basic human stuff. I want to feel secure. I don't want AI to take my job. I don't want to feel like I'm on the edge of losing my employment. I also feel overworked. I also feel like technology is a bulldozer. These are real common feelings for people. So I think a lot of it is understanding the temperature of the room before you open your mouth. And then you can, hopefully you drink it in carefully, be silent so you can listen, and then you're able to respond accordingly.
I love also that skill which you just mentioned, which is you ask for verification or whatnot, that what you're saying is what they're looking for. And I think that's an important thing. There are instances where I've been on pre-event calls and the speaker tells, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to say. It's going to be great. And what you're describing is the opposite. You're listening to them first. You're mirroring what they're saying. And then you're asking beyond that for verification of, and is that what I just heard you say? Is that correct? So I think those are 3 more great skills to know or to think about on pre-event call, and also when you're in front of the audience, right? That I imagine you listen and respond to your audience as well. Maybe, do you have any tips on that? Like, have you ever been in a cold room and or maybe you never have had a cold room, Freddie, because when you walk out there, like you bring the place to life. But maybe you've had a hot room and a hotter room. But how do you listen to that audience? How do you respond? Like, how do you know where to take your keynote? Obviously, you know what you're going to say, right? You know the content, but is there any adjustment you make during a keynote to bring up the level of the audience?
Well, I have a kind of a little secret weapon that most speakers don't have, and that is a keyboard, a piano. And if I don't feel like I'm reading the room yet through purely speaking, I'll use the piano and I'll talk about something that is related to where I'm at. So I was in Louisiana, and I know that these people have lived and breathed the blues. So I might play a little bit of blues and say, it's such an honor to be here in Louisiana, the home, some of the greatest. And I'll use that as a way to radar into the room a little bit. And I'll play really slowly, and then I'll hit the keys with a deliberate touch. And if I hear the crowd clap, I know I'm in the right place. If I don't hear them react, I might go to some boogie woogie, speed up the tempo a little bit, be more aggressive. Maybe I'll play a pop tune. So I will use the music. If you think about it, for those of you who have ever gone to a church service, and most of us have, most church services will tell you, especially the pastor will say, I don't even speak until the musicians do the first song. When the congregation walks in, I don't walk on stage. I let the music get the room tuned in. And the choir sings, or they do a piece of music, and the choir the audience, the congregation will settle in. And then the pastor will say, "Good morning, everybody. How's everyone feeling?" Well, the answer is predictable because the music already made them feel good. So that's a real proven case study that is proven every day in the churches across America about that.
So for speakers who don't have music, and a lot of them don't, right? They're not going to have a keyboard on stage. But what I'm hearing is a walk-up music is important, and it should be something that connects with the room, not just with you. Here's just one little error I think I see speakers make, and that's they'll play their favorite song, right? Or it's something that they really love, but maybe the audience would not feel. So you've got to make sure that you have a repertoire that when you say, oh, all right, this is going to be a younger group, this is going to be an older group, this is going to be women, this is going to be men, that you play something that will resonate with them as well for the walk-up. But also it sounds like that's where some of the energy comes from. So for people who say, I don't need walk-up music, I think what I'm hearing is priests, pastors, reverends use walk-up music. And it's a good idea.
It's a good idea. And by the way, the music that I use to bring me on is my original music. So but I use it because I have a different understanding about it. I'm going to jam on it. I'm also don't want to have any copyright violations, and so I'm thinking at a whole other level about things. But remember, there's certain rhythms that really work and certain tempos that really work. And the human heartbeat, for example, is 75 beats per minute. Most music that warms up an event is faster than the human heartbeat, right?
Okay.
100 to 110. And the disco music's about 120 to 130.
I was just going to say, when they teach CPR, we're going off here a little bit, they will use disco, right? Because they want to have 100 to 120 beats per minute. And that's why they use Staying Alive, man. Staying alive, staying alive. And it's because that's the beat you want for the heart to bring it up.
Right. And what makes that tune really good is the ha, 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 staying alive, staying alive. 1, 2, 3, 4. Staying alive, staying alive. And notice how
that's the heart that's hopping.
By the way, I mean, just, because you went there, because you went there. First of all, the Bee Gees are just fantastic, a fantastic group.
Oh my God. Sorry, Freddie. I was such a fan when I was a kid. Like, I was the fan, Anyway, continue.
Yeah, for those of you a different generation than Lee and I, go out and check out the Bee Gees and just hear some real music. Okay, number 2, they're separating their phrases. They're going, remember the space between the words? They're not going, staying alive. They're going, staying alive, staying alive. You see the space between the notes.
That's so funny. And even as you were saying it, you're going the ah. I'm like, okay. And the second you put the spaces there, I could feel my feet. I could feel John Travolta's feet going down the street, right? Because he was going. For those of you who are not watching this on video, you're missing out because Freddie and I are dancing on video. Switch over to YouTube.
We are.
All right.
We are. Across the country. Lee's in Connecticut. I'm in LA, and we're just connecting the whole US. Across the USA, baby.
Yep. People might have said disco was not cool. Let me tell you, though, your feet were tapping all the time. You couldn't help it. You had to go, right?
All the time.
All righty, let's move on. So let's talk about the audience again. So do you always walk into the audience? I've seen you move into the audience many times. When do you? When don't you?
You don't do it until they've gotten to know you and you feel it and they feel comfortable with you. You know, they don't know who you are. In the first 15, 20 minutes, they don't know who you are. They're like, who is this guy or this woman? Who? Let me see if I trust them. Let me see if I like what they're saying. So you have to kind of warm up the room and they kind of prove yourself a little bit. Watch the way good comedians, study comedians, by the way. That's another thing I'm going to tell all speakers. Study comedians. Because they are all about humor and timing. They've got incredible timing. That I think a great comedian they're masters. I study comedians because they don't have the advantage. I have a huge unfair advantage because I have music. That's an unfair advantage because most people don't. Comedians only have the mic in their voice. So what I'm going to say is win the audience before you get close to them. They have to trust you first. Then, I don't even go out into the audience until about 50% of the way into the talk. I don't think it's time to go out. They haven't gotten to know you yet. Let's say you're doing a 1-hour keynote. The first 30 minutes, you're laying out your philosophy. You're integrating their desires, hopefully. You've done your homework, and then you can go into the audience. I will say one last thing about homework. I am relentless. I practice a lot. I practice. I run the speech.
Thank you for saying that. Because you are someone who's done this over and over and over. Like you are a master keynote speaker and you practice. I hope people hear that and listen to it because too many beginners that I talk to go, I know what I'm going to do. I don't need to practice. And here's Freddie Ravel, who's done this for eons and is a master of the craft and he practices. I'm sorry for interrupting, but that's just I'm so passionate about that, obviously. Continue.
Well, I'll give you a case in point. So I just did a Life in Tune presentation last Saturday. And I was in a venue that had a very long range from the stage to the operating board. And they did not have a Macintosh computer. They just did. They just had PCs. I run my programs on Apple computers, and I think most speakers do. But this venue, for whatever reason, could not take my flash drive and do it. So I had to do it with my computer. And by the way, I always bring my computer to every gig, just in case you get there and they could even have a Mac, but they don't have the OS updated. And your keynote has different fonts. And the fonts are important because the fonts could be the fonts that are part of the company logo that you're speaking to. So I do quite a bit of homework with what the company is, their mission statement, even the logo and the brand and that. So that's all part of the talk that I've prepared. And so when I found out that they were 300 feet away from the stage, I ordered 2 remotes. 2. There was one that had a 980-foot range, and there was another one that had a 300-foot range. I ordered both of them, and I brought both of them to the soundcheck. And fortunately, the shorter range one worked perfectly well. But I had the one that was 3 times the range of the other, just in case it didn't. Why? Because if the remote doesn't click correctly and advance, because when I hit an advance, it's not just a slide, it's an entire video with music. It's running my show. So I test the clicker. That's an example of preparation. You could have the speech in your head. You could have your keynote together, and it looks great in your office. You're practicing it in your office. But if you take it out and you get 100 feet away from your computer, is it working? Most people don't test like that. But I'm obsessed with. I believe that you have to go into the event with so much confidence that you're relaxed. I go in very confident, but I'm so laid back by the time I get there because I prepared. This comes from music. I used to practice the piano 10 hours a day, and
Oh my goodness.
when I was 14 years old, because I started off on the accordion, and then I went to the piano later, and there were people that were 10, 11, 12 years old that played circles around me because they had more years practicing scales and arpeggios than I did. So I tried to make up for lost time. That's why I practiced 10 hours a day for 7 years.
Wow.
There's a saying, it's a very famous saying. There's a musician in New York City, and he's got his violin case, and he's getting out of the cab, and he's got his violin case, and that person walks up to him and says, "Hey, how do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And the old musician looks at him and he says, "Practice, practice, practice."
Oh my goodness. That is fantastic. I love it. I love it. All right. So once you get out into that audience, how do you engage with the audience? Have you talked with anyone beforehand, or are you just going directly out now, basically engaging with strangers? And how do you do that? I've seen some speakers, right, that they'll come out before they'll meet people in the hallway, they'll get to know a few people. But I think that, especially when you're a high-end keynote, right, you don't have the time necessarily to chat with people beforehand. How do you engage with them?
Yeah. And by the way, I don't believe in meeting with them beforehand, because you've already kind of ruined the surprise. That they've already seen you. I like to come. To me, it's a show. But I'm coming for the entertainment industry, so I believe that they haven't seen you. You come out, it's exciting, right? And what I do is I already have in my mind that I'm going to meet two people in the presentation, at least in this example I'm giving now, and I'm going to go to one side of the room and find somebody that has an energy. If you're walking out into the aisle, you're not going to go to the person that's looking at their iPhone while you're walking out. You're going to go to the person that's looking at you. And also you might look for the extroverts, because the extrovert's the person, like, you might see, okay, let's say I see 35 people in my first view. I see about 30, 40 people in front of me. I'm going to see one woman with a really nice necklace and nice earrings, and she's very present. The chances of me going to her are far greater than almost any other person in her vicinity, because she's putting it out there. She's putting out the energy. Hey, pick me, without saying. So I think a speaker needs to be attuned to that. Try to find somebody. And sure enough, usually when you go to the extrovert, right, they say, I go, "Hi, what's your name?" "Oh, my name is Sandy." "Sandy, it's so good to meet you." She goes, "Oh my God, it's so good to meet you." And I'm holding a mic to her, and because of her animation and her passion, the whole room goes, "Whoa, who's Sandy?" It's about Sandy right now. It's not about me. It's about Sandy, right? So I have to pick the right person that has the energy. And then I'll go to the other side of the room. And if I picked a woman on one side, I'm going to make sure I pick a man on the other. If I have a mixed audience, right? I try to be diplomatic and in picking people. So if I got Sandy on one side, I go to the other side of the room, and I walk into the crowd, and I make sure I pick a guy just to balance it out. And I'll try to pick a guy for the same reason. He's got a nice suit on. He's, or he's all tatted up. and he's got a good attitude and he's got a good grin on his face, or there's something about him that speaks to me. And then, okay, we got Bill. Bill, where are you from? I'm from Portland, Oregon. All right, how about a round of applause for Bill from Portland, Oregon? So I do a thing where I allow the audience to, acknowledge him. I haven't done anything with him yet. I just got his name. But that's still enough. It's still enough to get everyone engaged. By the time I'm done with Sandy and Bill, everyone knows their names, knows where they're from. And then maybe I ask them another question. Hey, what brings you here? I'm here to learn the latest mission statement for Dole Pine. So that's the way that's kind of part of the way that I engage, is that I ask a lot of questions, and I try to make it be about them, not about me.
Okay, well, I'm looking and the time is popping here. I don't want this to end, but I can only imagine people are going, Lee, you've already run over. We need to move to the end of the podcast. But thank you so much for being here today, because you said so many things that other people have not said before, and in a different way. I learned a lot, and just like the way you listen, the way you present, it's a wonderful thing. And can I just say, you have a fabulous voice. Listening to your voice is so soothing. At the end of our conversations, I always just feel relaxed because you have a lovely voice. Anyway, I'm going to ask one last question, and that is, here's one for you to ponder. You've been doing this a long time. You're what, 29 years old, so it couldn't have been that long. You've got some mileage. But if you could take one piece of advice of what you do now, and you could go back to Freddie, who just started speaking when you're on your first stages, what piece of advice would you give beginner speaker or emerging speaker, Freddie?
It's not about you. It's about the audience.
That is beautiful. Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap there. Thank you so much, Freddie Ravel. This has been a fabulous podcast. Can't wait to see you on more stages, because any company just who brings you is thrilled. You're a 10 out of 10. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. So long.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Path to the Main Stage. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for full video episodes, check out YouTube. If you want to be a successful speaker, you need to make it happen. My co-hosts and I are here to help guide you. But if you need more help, please check out pathtothemainstage.com, where we can connect. And until next time, keep sharing your voice, keep showing up, and keep taking your path to the main stage.